Okay, good evening and welcome to the Zoning Board of Appeals meeting for the town of Eastchester. Today is Tuesday, November 14th, 2023. We begin our meetings with the Pledge of Allegiance. Please rise. Okay, while everyone's getting seated, I usually take this opportunity to go over some of the ground rules for the meeting this evening. Firstly, the meeting is conducted under Robert's Rules of Parliamentary Order, which is a big book, but to summarize it very quickly, decisions are made based on motion, vote, and resolution. And for the public, when the public meeting is opened by a motion, you'll be able to speak on certain applications and certain topics when recognized by the chair. Also, hello, Counselor. We don't accept new correspondence when we close the public hearing. It's important to note this because more and more of commentary are coming in by way of email and letter, and those items are like an application marked submitted, and they're part of the public record. So the public can review it, and it's all part and parcel of the review and submission by the board. Once the public hearing is closed on a matter, no material can be accepted. So it's not reviewed, it's not accepted, and it's not part of the record. I just want to mention that. Before I call the roll, I have a couple of housekeeping motions. The first is that I make a motion to approve the minutes of the October 10th, 2023 meeting. Is there a second to my motion?
I'll second.
Mr. Cahalan, all in favor?
Aye.
Secondly, I make a motion to adjourn the December meeting to January 9th. Is a second to that motion?
I'll second that.
Mr. Cahalan, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay. We have one item of old business and 3 items of new business, one of which is now been adjourned on consent of the applicant. So 22-27, which is 360 White Plains Road, has been adjourned on consent until January. So we have one item of old business, and that's the Beach Street subdivision. Is the applicant here? Is the applicant ready to proceed? I'm just calling the roll. I'm sorry to get you up.
That's quite all right. We are ready to proceed. We understand that you may make some adjustments to the agenda.
Correct.
Right.
Okay.
We're fine with that.
Great, thank you. Okay. Okay. Under items of new business, application 23-32, 600 White Plains Road. Is the applicant present? Are you ready to proceed? Okay, I'll let you know when we're ready to roll. Last one is application 23-33, 2 Cross Hill Road. Is the applicant here? Are you ready to proceed? Fantastic, thank you. Okay, on to the resolution calendar. Item number 1, I make a motion to adopt the resolution of approval for application 23-15, Sal's Market and Pizzeria. Is there a second to my motion?
I'll second.
Mr. Cahalan, to the vote. Mr. Cahalan?
Yes.
Mr. Miller?
Yes.
Mr. Conway?
Yes.
And I vote yes. That application has been approved 4-0. Item number 2, I make a motion to adopt the resolution of approval for application 23-25, 31 Hathaway. Is there a second to that motion?
Second.
Mr. Miller, to the vote. Mr. Cahalan?
No.
Mr. Miller?
Yes.
Mr. Conway?
Yes.
I vote yes. That application has been approved 3-1. Number 3, I make a motion to adopt the resolution of approval for application 23-26, 14 Arlington Road. Is there a second?
Second.
Mr. Miller, to the vote. Mr. Cahalan?
Yes.
Mr. Miller?
Yes.
Mr. Conway?
Yes.
And I vote yes. That application has been approved 4-0. Item number 4, I make a motion to adopt the resolution of approval for application 23-28, 37 Central Drive. Is there a second to my motion?
Second.
Mr. Cahalan, to the vote. Mr. Cahalan?
Yes.
Mr. Miller?
Yes.
Mr. Conway?
Yes.
I vote yes. That application has been approved 4-0. Okay, on to new business items. So before I call on your new business item, let me just go over briefly in conjunction with Robert's Rules of Parliamentary Order. Your application and your whole package has been marked submitted. The board has had an opportunity to review. In many instances, the board has been to the premises. it's not necessary for you to read the application. It won't hurt your application. It won't help either. So I would suggest that you simply summarize, and then procedurally what happens is the board will generally have an opportunity to ask questions, sometimes comment, and then if a motion's approved to open the public hearing, the public will have an opportunity to be heard. The applicant can reply, then it'll go back to the board. So having said that, let's get to this business item number 3. This is application 23-32, 600 White Plains Road. And can the applicant state name and address for the record, and please proceed? Oh, I'm sorry, yes. Because of our stenographer needs to get a record, everything is recorded. So yes.
My name is Kevin Munene, representing Shaheen Badali on this application. Address is 2 Wilson Place, Mount Vernon, New York. Our application is to propose to construct a new 19-feet canopy structure at the property known as 1600 White Plains Road. The property is currently has a principal building that is a convenience store with a gasoline station at the front yard of the property, which has 2 gas pumps that do not have a roof structure above it. The property is located in a R-75 residential zone district, and the proposed height of the canopy, including the location and the proposed alterations, are deemed non-conforming as per the zoning code of Eastchester. The requirements for the height are 12 feet for the canopy structure or any accessory structure. We're proposing a 9 feet canopy structure. We're also proposing the structure at the front yard of the property, which is not allowed as per the zoning requirements, and performing alterations to an existing non-conforming use is also deemed non-conforming as per the zoning code. So we're requesting the variance for those 3 components of the application.
Okay, thank you for your summary. At this point, we usually allow the board to ask questions or have comments. I have a couple of quick questions of you, because I know that those pumps are legal non-conforming. So their proximity to the right-of-way in the street is necessarily going to require a variance. But my questions are that I noticed that the canopy doesn't have any fire suppression system within it. So can you explain the reason for the canopy?
We do have a fire sprinkler. It might not be shown on the plans, but
Okay.
On one of the principal points, we do mention that the canopy will have a fire sprinkler system, which improves, the existing condition.
Well, thank you. I wanted to clarify that. And also, I believe minimum clearance was 13 and a half feet, Mr. Herbert?
That's correct.
Okay.
That's in the building code.
So why the extra 5.5 feet in elevation?
So we anticipate that the delivery trucks, we went with the worst case scenario with the 16 feet clearance for the delivery trucks. So that's what we worked with. If the reduction to a 13 and a half feet clearance is what your requirement would be, we can work with the owner to make sure that that's the kind of trucks that we'll be delivering. But as per the current situation and our design, we propose for the worst case scenario of a truck delivery.
Okay, thank you.
No worries.
Mr. Cahalan, any questions or comments?
No, I just want to echo, that was my thing. I looked around town at the other gas stations, and they're all about, 12 and a half to 15 feet. So I was wondering why 19 feet? These tankers, especially the gas tankers, don't have the height of the trucks, the delivery trucks. They're a little bit lower because they go to very different locations than, your Walmart or Amazon trucks. So that was my concern too. I have a problem with the 19 feet. I'd be much more comfortable at, 16 is where I'm thinking it belongs.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Cahalan. Mr. Miller?
No questions.
Mr. Conway?
No questions for me.
Okay, I don't have anything further. I make a motion to open the public hearing on this matter. Is there a second?
Second.
Mr. Cahalan, all in favor? Aye. Would anyone from the public like to be heard on this application? Okay, seeing no one, I make a motion to close the public hearing on this matter.
Close it.
Okay, that's your
I'll
second,
second.
I think, and all in favor? Aye?
Aye.
Okay. I just want to clarify this, because you commented on it, and then Mr. Cahalan made some commentary as well. There's a safety issue involved here, and is the 19 feet that you had requested something that was just aspirational, or is it something that you feel is necessary based on the truck height?
So, if I can step to the
Please, please.
So the 19 feet comes about because of the gable roof here, but the 16 feet clear height is up to the ceiling of the canopy, and then a 3-foot extra addition for this roof structure to be constructed, which is sloping up to create.
I see.
If you could just use the microphone
Yes.
for the record. You can bring it over.
Yeah, it's important that you get on the record, because you're measuring 19 from the highest point of the gable roof, but that the lowest point is 16.
We're not making it easy on this guy.
No.
Yeah, so just to elaborate again, if you look at the structure and the way it's constructed, okay. Yep. So the clear height from the bottom of the structure to the to the bottom of the ceiling is 16 feet, and it's indicated on the plans. It's dimensioned as well. But then now the additional 3 feet is because of the sloped roof at the top of the structure. So that's why it comes down to 19
So
feet.
it's not a flat roof?
It's not a flat roof.
It's a pitch.
Yes, sir.
How does that relate to the building behind it then? The actual structure that's there right now, is that gonna completely make it disappear?
No. So the structure line is right here. It's about 3.5 feet above the roof of the canopy.
So you're gonna have a double, you're gonna see the
Right.
canopy, and then you're gonna see the building. So where does the truck fill up in relationship to the pumps?
So-
On what side of the property is it?
Let me show you. All right, so the canopy itself is right here within the 30 feet frontage required. There is about 35 feet between the canopy and the principal building where the trucks can pull in. There's ample space to pull in there, and the two pumps are right there underneath.
But where does he put the gas into the underground tanks?
The apron is right here, and I believe there is the tanks are underneath this area right here. So
He has more than enough clearance to go under at 16 feet and come out the other side.
right, that's the whole worry. Yeah, the 16 feet clearance.
Okay, thank you.
No worries.
Mr. Miller, anything?
Nope.
No, and I just would like to add, because I buy my gas there, that there's also a bit of a grade when you come in off of the curb cut, so that it's actually slightly higher. I can't tell you what it is, but there is a grade, and then it drops down, so that elevation may also be needed until it drops down, and the delivery is on the north side, because when it's there, no one can get in, so
Right.
I'm familiar with it, so it makes sense to me. Mr. Conway, anything?
Nothing for me.
Okay. Well, I think you've answered, for my satisfaction, anyway, the 5-part test. I'm going to make a motion to adjourn this application for resolution at the next meeting in January. Is there a second?
Second.
Mr. Kaling, all in favor?
Aye.
Thank you for your presentation. Okay, next item on the agenda, new business is application 23-33, 2 Cross Hill Road. Name and address for the record, and please proceed.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, staff. Brad Schwartz from Zarin Steinmetz, representing the applicant, joined by Lucian Cruz and Martin Staff, property owners, and project architect Donald Riolano. So we're here tonight for an area variance application the size of what's minimally required in the zoning district. I mention that right up front because the oversized nature of the property is a big factor in our reason why we think the variance is justified, and why we think this home, as proposed, makes sense and fits on the property. In fact, we did a comparative analysis, floor area ratio basis, taking the floor area of the proposed home as compared to the overall lot size, and we compared that to the other homes on the nearby streets, and what we found is that the proposal will be consistent with the character development on nearby properties. Adamo will walk the board through that analysis and all the project drawings. You also hear from Adamo quite a bit about his design of the home. You all know the balancing test, benefit to the applicant, detriment to the community. We submit there's no detriment to the community, but the benefit to the applicant is very meaningful. The design of the home is designed to allow our clients to accommodate their extended family for holidays, visits. Both of our clients have one living parent, and so they tend to host all family gatherings. The design of the home takes that into account. The last thing I'll mention is, I believe this afternoon, we also submitted for your board, for the record, 7 letters of support for the area residents. I just wanted your board to be aware of that and factor that into the deliberation.
Thank you. Okay, thank you for your presentation. Do you want Mr. Majorano to present his end of it right now, or do you?
Yes.
Okay, please proceed.
Good evening, board members. Adamo Majorano from Community Designs and Engineering. So yes, just to, take some time and walk through the overall architectural of the house and, how we got here today. As Brad mentioned, the clients, applicants, homeowners have very specific intentions of the overall space that they need for the home, not just outside the house, but also inside the house, as well as the size of the rooms in particular that they're gonna occupy inside the house. So starting off with the floor plan, again, what we did ultimately was take their existing home that they live in now and see what worked for them and what doesn't, and the size of the rooms that, they really need to improve on, because again, so a lot of people would say they're building a house that they're trying never to move out of and stay there for a long time, and that's why, again, the square footage of the house, there will be no add-ons or adjustments, because it works perfectly for them. So, starting off the garage, again, it's a 2-car garage, but it's an oversized 2-car garage, so you're allowed 400 square foot deduction from your overall square footage, but this, garage is, just over 600 square feet, so that added square footage goes into the gross square footage, but again, it's just occupied in the garage. We did keep it still just a 2-bay garage. Can you fit 3-bay garage? Yes, but that was a specific, decision not to be, out of character of the neighborhood, because yes, there are very minimal 3-car garage homes, but 2-car fits better in this neighborhood, obviously. So.
Is there an on-off switch on that light that someone might show up?
Is that better?
Did you get that for the record, or?
It's on, it's just a little low, I'm getting needles big.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that. Otherwise, the stenographer would
Okay,
call up screaming at us.
I'll try to, okay, so.
Start all over now.
Okay, so again, I don't want to bore you with it, but, we took a lot of time with the house, so just running
Please.
through it. Again, first floor was very important for the rooms and sizes, so we started with that, and then we thought, okay, for the second floor, we could chop it up as much as possible to try to get the square footage as down as much as we can, but the applicant still needed, just 3 bedrooms in the second floor, again, and a very, comfortable walk-in closet for the master. So, in doing so, again, the second floor rooms are not any bit of out of nature character that you would see in a 3,000 square foot home. They're not massive rooms up there. What we did was we took out all of the area above the garage and office space, made that a story and a half, and basically at the end we were left with the square footage that we are presenting with you today. It was very hard for the applicant to try to adjust and minimize anywhere possible that we looked into. So what we did was move on to the elevation to try to create a certain home that would fit in the character of the neighborhood, an architectural home that you would see everywhere throughout that specific neighborhood. In specific with the design elements to create the massing of the home, to try to minimize that massing as much as possible. The front porch is a key feature that helps create the scale that basically brings the scale of the house down. So because it's a corner lot, the wraparound porch was not just a design element, architectural feature, but it was, functional that the applicant wishes to have and use. So going into the variances, the front porch, the overall width, you're allowed 30%. We're over that 30% because we really want the, front porch to reflect from the front door and wrap around the house, so it's greater than that 30% of the front elevation. Now, the width of the front porch, we are going into the front yard basically a foot. The foot is very essential to this because when you're occupying that front porch, right, you're allowed 4 feet. When you factor in a column, you have 3 feet left over. When you put a chair on there and you try to, move around that space, that 3 feet is very minimal. So we thought 5 feet would be optimal for the use of that front porch. And again, it's into the front yard. We're cross hill away from the neighboring and the rear yard. So we moved the house further forward. As we get into coverage, so after the front porch, okay, coverage, mainly the house is far under what you're allowed coverage, but what was crucial to have an outdoor area for the applicants, which is a covered patio. The covered patio is roughly around 500 square feet, so that gets factored in the building coverage, and that's what brings us over. But what we tried to do is, can't really see it from here, is, what we did was just create, not a gabled roof or anything of that nature. We just put a flat roof on the back of the house so that would have the least amount of impact and, effect on the neighboring residents. Basically just a few, three columns and a flat roof over that area. Then lastly, for the variances, impervious area. Impervious area, again, once we had the overall bulk of the house, we have a patio and driveway. There wasn't much left over for us to eliminate. It's very minimal that's over what's allowed, but again, we looked into what we could possibly do to minimize that. The front walkway is just grass, stepping stones as minimal as possible. We looked into possible permeable pavers of the driveway, but that wouldn't do much because zoning, it does count 100% as far as coverage, so it wouldn't benefit us. But the one good thing is, yes, any new home, we need to mitigate 100% of the stormwater that runoff over 100% of the impervious area, so there'll be all new stormwater mitigation for the new house. Obviously, the existing house has none of that. Then, lastly, again, as Brad mentioned, that sort of comparative analysis. Not to go over every specific number, but, here we can see that our floor area ratio is 36% of the oversized lot that we're occupying. If you look at all of the analysis of neighboring homes directly adjacent to us, it's very comparable to those scale homes. Some of the homes are, what's very important too, we're in an R6 zone that is right directly adjacent to an R7.5 district that you can have, another probably 350 square feet of area. So we are, yes, at a buffer of the bigger scale homes, but there are homes very similar to lot size and floor area ratio of our proposed home.
Thank you, Mr. Majorano. I
Thank
appreciate
you.
your presentation.
All right.
Is the applicant interested in presenting anything further before the board asks questions or makes comments? Okay. So, Mr. Kalin, do you have any questions or comments of the applicant?
Unfortunately, I do.
Okay.
I live in the neighborhood, and the numbers, the pictures that you're showing are all the newer homes. You didn't show any of the existing homes in that area. Brassey, Oakland. The new homes are the ones that you picked out, and you did mention that the R7 is above that, which have the massive homes, okay? But that lot is a huge lot. I agree with what your attorney said. So moving it out a foot to the street, not such a bad idea, I get that. My problem is I'm thinking it's like a McMansion. Again, we fought the zoning code to do away with McMansions, and you're asking for 4,176 square feet when only 30,059, that's, a 36% variance. And I understand the family wants what the family wants. I get that. And you've designed a beautiful home. There's no question about it. will it fit in with the newer homes in the neighborhood? I can't argue that. But my problem is still on that fifth variance. That's a big ask, as far as I'm concerned. I don't know how the rest of the board feels, but, that's one of the variances that really disturbs me. Everything else, you've explained wonderfully. I can't argue with you on it. But that one, I think you're grabbing a little bit too much. So that's where I am, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, any questions of the applicant, or just the commentary?
That's my comment.
Okay, Mr. Miller?
No questions.
Mr. Conway?
No questions.
I don't have anything at this time. I make a motion to open the public hearing on this matter. Is there a second?
Second.
Mr. Cahalan, all in favor?
Aye.
Would anyone from the public like to be heard on this? Okay, seeing no one, I make a motion to close the public hearing on this matter. Is there a second?
Second.
Mr. Miller, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, back to the board. Actually, if the applicant would like to reply to that one comment, and then the board may have other questions of the applicant, either Mr. Mayorano or Mr. Schwartz, it doesn't matter.
We certainly appreciate the comment. I would just respond to that by saying again that the 3,000 or so square feet that's permitted as of right contemplates a 6,000 square foot lot. So the extra square footage that our client is proposing, again, taking into account the almost double the lot size, is why we believe it's a fair and reasonable request. But I certainly appreciate the comment and just wanted to quickly, briefly.
I appreciate the answer, but it's still, it's still a big ask.
Anything else, Mr. Cahalan?
No.
Mr. Miller?
No.
Mr. Conway? Okay, well, the only comment I have is that, again, focusing on the five-part test, and it seems like the board's concern, or at least one member of the board's concern, is character of the community. I'm less concerned about that because it, again, mixing and matching the neighborhood, it seems to be with a larger lot consistent and the others being de minimis. But again, that's just one board member's viewpoint, and I'm one vote.
Well, Mr. Chairman, I agree.
yeah, go ahead, Mr.
I
Cahalan.
disagree with you on it. De minimis. These are not de minimis variances. They're all over 20%. So when we start talking about de minimis, we're talking about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5%. Let's call it what it is. This is a big home. They got a big lot, and they want to overbuild on it. In my opinion, you may feel differently.
I just did, yeah.
Yeah. So, but I hate to say, in my backyard, I live in a neighborhood there almost 30 years, and yes, I understand the neighborhood's changing. And like I said, it is a beautiful home. There's no question about it. But I was here when the mansion started.
Okay.
Okay, is that where we're going again with this stuff? Because we're giving them a 36%, and all the other variances are pretty significant. But we didn't talk about those because they really make sense on a big lot like that. Can't argue that point. But that one variance is very substantial to the neighborhood. And I do believe that changes the character of the neighborhood, as it's been changing. But, we keep approving things here. When do we stop, is my question.
Well, we view the application, not the applicant, and
I'm not
we're-
viewing the
yeah.
I'm viewing the application. The applicant has nothing to do with it. It could be anybody. I don't care who it is.
Yeah, but your commentary is public policy, and we're a quasi-judicial tribunal, and that kind of thinking really is more in line with the legislative branch of the town council.
No, maybe because I was there too, so I'm sorry about that.
No, I listen, you're the valued member of this board. You go to every house, and you spend a lot of time on these applications.
I just had to walk up the hill, so it wasn't so bad.
Well, this was an easy one for you. So as they say, first year of law school, reasonable minds may differ. So I have a motion to adjourn this application and resolution at the next meeting. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Mr. Cahalan, all in favor? Aye. Thank you.
Good night.
Good night. And again, just so that, for those new applications, the resolutions are being heard in January 9th.
Thank you.
Okay, take care. Okay, we have one item left on the calendar.
They're asking a lot.
That's old business. This is application 23-02. So just while the applicant is getting settled in, just to kind of recap where we are, the public hearing is still open on this matter. The applicant has submitted some supplementation to the application, and procedurally what we're going to do is we're going to have the applicant summarize the supplementation to their application, and then the public will have an opportunity to be heard on that. And although the public can comment on any aspect of the application, I'm going to ask the public to try to be focused on the five-part test as it relates to the supplementation. I also want to make mention of one thing, because the board, as you saw from our procedural round at the beginning, we ratify minutes from prior meetings, which means we read the minutes. And it was something that struck me at the last meeting, and I tend to be very liberal in what I allow as far as commentary. And it didn't strike me right at the meeting, and after reading the minutes, it really didn't strike me right. So I have to caution the public. Gents, may I?
Sure.
Okay. I need to caution the public on the hyperbolic commentary, particularly the personal nature of the commentary, attacking board members for having like blood on their hands, if there's car accidents and fatalities and death of children. I'm not only am I not going to allow it, but this, just as I guess an homage to the late Peter Nerzia, I am going to remind people, this board is here and we volunteer. We're doing community service. So I'm not only not going to allow it, people who do that should be ashamed of themselves. I understand it affects you, but this board is here for every application doing community service, not just the applications that affect them. So I apologize to the board for allowing that to happen. That will not happen again. And I had Mr. Herbert and I have checked. There is no greater incidence of fatalities or accidents. You could say that the traffic may be made worse by this application, and you could be reasonable, and most people have voiced that opinion. But to get into hyperbolic commentary about board members having liability and blood on their hands is ridiculous, and that will not happen again. Proceed.
Mr. Chairman, good evening. For the record, David Smith, Principal of the Planning and Development Advisors. I appreciate the comments that you just made. I've been doing this business for 35 years. I know I don't look it. And your commentary is spot on. I really appreciate it. These are applications that come in before you. I understand that change is difficult often. That's what I do for a living. It's not easy. What you do for a living, or what you do here on behalf of the town of Eastchester, is not easy, but it's appreciated because it's a public service. And I work with many communities, many boards, and the time and effort that you put in on behalf of your community, I think, is a great service to your community. And with that, I just want to recognize that a lot of the effort just to get us to this point was related to the work that the planning board did. And I think that I just want to recognize up front that the planning board, your planning board, the town of Eastchester Planning Board, did I think, a phenomenal job in taking in all the information, reviewing that, and I've included and summarized some of that in my remarks. But I just wanted to start off by recognizing the work that you do and the work that the other members in the community do on behalf of the town of Eastchester. With that, I'm just going to quickly review for you the proposed application. It's approximately 1.8 acres. Highland Avenue is located to the north, and Beach Street is located off to the bottom of the page. There's a proposed 8-lot subdivision. All of the proposed lots are zoning compliant. 2 of the lots will come off of Highland Avenue. 5 of the lots will come off of a proposed cul-de-sac, which meets the town standards for dimensions with 2 exceptions, and I'll get into that in a minute. And then there's a separate lot that acts as Beach Street. There's a proposed non-building lot. This lot will be used for stormwater management as part of the overall project design. Yeah. So we're here tonight after, and I want to go back to the process, but I just wanted to let you know that we're here tonight after review by the planning board for 2 variances. The first is this variance for the required 12-foot right-of-way at the intersection. This little piece right here is not on the applicant's property. It's on an adjacent piece of property. It's our understanding that the town has approved a variance of this type before in the past. So that's the first variance. And the second variance is an offset distance between the intersection of Siwanoy Boulevard and our proposed cul-de-sac. The code requires 150 feet. We have an offset distance of 108 feet. So those are the two variances that we are requesting. So just to go through the process, because I think it's important, the planning board, we initiated this process with the planning board starting in January of this year. The planning board went through and initiated the secret process. That's the State Environmental Quality Review Act. That actions are required to be taken, planning board, zoning board. And through the course of several months, we had public hearings, and I'm going to have Mr. Dempsey go through, I think, what are the most important issues that came out of the last discussion, which was related to traffic. But the planning board eventually, in June, issued a negative declaration under seeker. And that's a determination of significance that the proposed action, which we're contemplating right now, will have no significant adverse impact on the environment. So as part of that, they took the hard look. And so I will just summarize that for a negative declaration to be upheld, the record must show that the agency identified relevant areas of environmental concern, thoroughly analyzed them for significant adverse impact, and supported its determination with reasoned elaboration. Now, the negative declaration that I'm referring to was included in our initial submission to your board dated August of 2023. So it was part of your package as part of the record. With respect to the matter, it's noted that the involved agencies, such as your board, cannot supersede a lead agencies, in this case the planning board, a determination of significance. It is binding on all involved agencies. I included some of the citations in our presentation materials included with your package. In addition, the planning board, in its review of the application of the EAF, determined that the proposed action is consistent with the community character. So the first step in the process with an application of the proposed zoning, proposed subdivision to the planning board was determined that variances are required, so that the planning board initiated and concluded the environmental review process. The next step in the process is to come before your board for a decision on the variance request. In the event that there is a positive outcome with respect to the request for variances, the next step would be to go back to the planning board for subdivision approval. After that, and Mr. Dempsey will get into this in more detail, after that we would need to go to the town board for vehicle and traffic improvements, new signage and parking restrictions. After that, we would need to go to the Westchester County Health Department for subdivision, sewer and water main extensions, and then New York State DEC as part of the stormwater management process. So procedurally, that's where we are in this process. There are subsequent steps that need to be taken after your board makes a determination. And so this is not the last step in this process, hopefully. So I think that sets kind of the framework for why we're here. I'm going to ask Mr. Dempsey to walk you through the traffic analysis that was prepared throughout the course of this process, because I think it's important to understand the context in which this proposed application was reviewed and considered before the planning board.
I just want to clarify one thing about what you said.
Please, Counselor.
One of the things that concerned me was the planning board did initially conduct a review of our environmental impacts. And that review is determinative of those issues. But it is not binding on this board with respect to the variances that you are in front of this board for. So the curb cut, the sight line, whatever variances you've come to this board has the authority to decide based upon whatever information, whatever concerns they have, or whatever support they have for the application. But it is separate and apart from that secret determination, at least as it relates to the variances themselves. I just want to clarify that for whoever's watching at home.
Yes. Thank you, Counselor.
Okay.
So please proceed.
Good evening. For the record, Brian Dempsey. I'm a licensed professional engineer from the firm DTS Provident Design Engineering. We conducted the traffic study. I'll be brief because we've gone through some of this before. Prior to conducting it, we had discussions with the town planner at the time, Mrs. Yuli, and the town's traffic consultant, Phil Grilly. They developed the scope of the traffic study, which we followed, and we conducted a traffic study back the end of last year, early this year. They had reviewed that study. Some comments came back. We had updated and adjusted the study. And then through the process, based upon comments from the board, the planning board, comments from residents, we conducted several additional studies, including counting other cul-de-sacs in the area, doing speed measurements, counting pedestrians, all sorts of other studies for comparison purposes to make sure what was utilized in the traffic study was representative. So one of the things we were asked to do was to do a comparison of the traffic during the peak hours. This side's the AM, the other side's the PM. At the intersections of Highland Avenue and Beach, which is this one, Beach and Siwanoy here, and Beach and Rose. So what's here in these first three columns, the first three colors are what's existing traffic now. We were required to include some existing growth, and then we also had separated out the existing trucks. So that gets you up to here. This additional color in here, and I'm partially colorblind, I'll say it's another blue shade, is the additional traffic, which there's the 5 houses on the cul-de-sac, the one other house that has access to Beach. The other 2 houses have the access directly to Highland. We were conservatively included all of it as coming out of the one driveway. So this is that traffic, and this would account for any buses or trucks that would be occurring during the peak hour. And as you can see, we were such a really small percentage. Real quickly, just to flip to the PM, yeah, obviously it's the same situation. Our traffic is essentially negligible. We provided the percentages and everything in our studies. So we are not generating significant amount of traffic. This was confirmed by the town's traffic consultant. It was backed up by the studies of the other cul-de-sacs in the area and such. So we showed through that we're not going to have a traffic impact. The one variance that was discussed last time was a concern about the 150-foot distance between the 2 intersections. This was reviewed significantly with the planning board. The town's traffic consultant commented at the last hearing on it, but also he wrote out, and we listed what's in his memos, saying that there will not be an issue with this distance for various reasons. 1, adequate site distances are being provided at the 2 locations. 2, the peak traffic volumes are relatively low, and additional turning movements from the new cul-de-sac will not have any effect on that. The extension of Beach Street is essentially another cul-de-sac. It's a dead end. It has very low volumes. It has 3 houses as compared to the 5 that would be with this cul-de-sac. And the low peak hour volumes will not have an effect on the left turns. The left turn issue is the main issue of why this variance, this is put into ordinances, and as Mr. Grilli explained, with the cul-de-sac here, if the other driveway was in this location, there would be more of an issue. But since anyone turning left into the cul-de-sac here, they're not going to have any effect on people here. The reason the ordinance would be is if people were turning left here and they were backed up, that could affect the driveway, or Siwanoy in this case, if Siwanoy was in that location of the intersection. Those cars are not going to back up, so as he stated, there would be no left turn effect on that location.
Okay.
So that was the issue with that. I can go into some more details. We did have various meetings with the town's traffic consultant, with the police department, with the fire department, with the town planner, both Lucas and Ms. Yuli, because it changed during the process. And we looked at the different parking ordinances. We reviewed the accident data. The reason we were talking about, and this is a Google photo, this was just why we're recommending to eliminate the parking on the one side. It's just from a safety standpoint, these cars are parked here. This car is coming through. There's really not much room for another vehicle there. If you did maintain the parking on both sides, cars have to try to serpentine through. Emergency vehicles will have difficulty, and it's our opinion to eliminate the parking on that side. We went through this is an existing parking figure that was in the book. This section of Beach Street from Highland to Rose right here is signed, no parking on one side of the street. And then from Rose, there was a sign here that said no parking this way. It is not there anymore. The sign here also that was on the stop sign has also been removed in the last 2 years or so. But there is no parking permitted within 30 feet of the stop sign anyhow, so that first 30 feet, there is no parking permitted on that side. These dashed there is no parking permitted on those spots too by this town code. They're not signed, but in the code, those still exist. There's no parking around this corner and in this section right here. Part of that is where there are multiple driveways. And then here, the last stretch, there is no parking on the one side once you get on the dead end part of Beach. The town planner went through and had several comments in one of his detailed memos at the end of the planning board process, or towards the end of the planning board process. Between his comments, the comments from the town's traffic consultant, there were various roadway improvements recommended that, and it started with changing the sign at Ridge Street. There is a current sign that says Tuckahoe Schools this way, but to make that sign a little more visible. Now people are mainly going to go however they feel comfortable going, but if you can pull some more cars going that way to the schools, that was one suggestion. The other aspects we were asked to look at and we agreed with, which were all recommended by the town's traffic consultant, was adding some radar speed signs in the neighborhood, including here. So this is Beach here. I know it's a little bit faded. And another one in this area, and in both directions. And consideration of making the intersection of Rose and Beach an all-way stop. Right now, it's just Rose, and that was more from comments from some people who live on Rose about cars going around the corner. So we would be willing to do that if the town's in favor of it. There was some also issue about some trimming of some vegetation for sight distance at that intersection there. And then to leave all the parking on the north side, restrict the parking on the south side, and almost all the parking people park is on the north side of this stretch, because you have that serpentine effect. Those were, the applicant was willing to do all those. There were other things looked at, like speed humps, and the town's traffic consultant did not recommend them because the speeds are low enough where they really wouldn't have any effect. Because when you have a low speed, the speed humps really don't change much. So those were the traffic improvements that were recommended by the town's traffic consultant and the planning board, and the planning consultant were acceptable to those. And we're here for any other questions.
Okay. So, is there anything further from the applicant on this, the supplementation of the application before I go to the board?
So, Mr. Chairman, at the last meeting, there was a comment raised about an alternative access to the site from Highland Avenue. And I think we explained at the time that our client, Mr. Kukai, had met with, and the engineers had met with Mr. Herbert's predecessor, Margaret Yulee, and there was an issue about the length of the cul-de-sac coming in off of Highland. And so that's why that particular design wasn't pursued by the applicant. And so it's really, I don't think it's fair to call it an alternative. It's really a redesign. It's a completely different design concept because of the access, because of the utilities, because of the stormwater management. And so that's why I think it was important for us to go through the process that the planning board went through in evaluating the proposed subdivision that's currently before you as the proposed action. And I think part of what our understanding is that the length of the cul-de-sac was an issue, and that that Ms. Yulee didn't want to have a precedent set with respect to the length of the cul-de-sac. And I can kind of understand that, because the longer the cul-de-sac, again, perhaps more density could be accommodated on a particular site. So that's why my client and the applicant have pursued this application. It went through an extensive environmental review, as we've discussed. There was a negative declaration which looked at the potential impacts. Mitigation has been identified. We still need to go to the town. We still need to go to the planning board for subdivision approval, and then we still need to go to the town board for some of these recommendations on improving the conditions within that neighborhood with respect to traffic and circulation. So I think, Mr. Chairman, that concludes our presentation for tonight. We're happy to answer any questions, or if you want to turn it over to the public.
Yeah, actually, I have a question. Is it your statement that the Highland access issue was the length of the cul-de-sac, and that Mrs. Yulee had given negative feedback on that?
That's correct.
Okay. Because one of the 5 parts is the feasibility of other means to achieve, and you're certainly free to pursue any application you like. It's not for me to tell you how to apply, but I had asked that question last time, and
Yes.
it didn't get an answer, and I'm still not clear on your answer. But again, you're not on trial, and you bring any application you want, and you're free to pursue any application you want. Let me see if the board has any questions of this
Mr.
supplemental.
Chairman,
Yes,
could I just raise a
Counselor,
legal
please.
issue? that was addressed the last time that I still believe is outstanding. Legally, in terms of, the applicant indicated that they still plan on going before the board with respect to some of the parking restrictions. That is something that this board really can't address, that the town board has to. And if I recall correctly, one of the issues that led up to adjourning the last time was because we're looking at an application in which we don't know what the position of the town board is with respect to parking on one side of the street, on both sides of the street. It may be possible for cars to meander, but I think the issue that was laid out by yourself was emergency vehicles in terms of trucks and fire trucks and that type of thing.
Among other vehicles.
So that still is a legal issue that, in terms of whether or not this application is at the point where you can decide it.
Understood. Thank you, Counselor. Mr. Cahalan, any questions or comments of the applicant at this time?
Well, I don't do this much, but I want to thank Mr. Smith for laying it out. You're one of the few attorneys that's ever answered a direct question that the chairman has ever proposed. I've been sitting here a long time, and I don't get many of that, and I don't do this often. So I appreciate your direct reply on the process, because that is significant. And to our council, there's a lot that, your presentation was very clear on the lead agency and traffic, and making it clear, reading this thing is not fun. I'm sure preparing it isn't either, but, I read this thing from cover to cover. So it became abundantly clear early on, you don't want us to talk about traffic. And I get that, because we're not the lead agency. But the significant, I saw pictures today about fire trucks on the street. That, is still a concern of mine, whether this board has that right to say that or not. Just as a citizen, I'm gonna put that out there. But I do thank you for laying it out, because there is a process, and I think the chairman asking you to lay that process out, at least for myself, brought clarity to the process. And as you said, and as your engineer said, there is still a lot to do on this application, as far as I'm concerned. But I wanted to talk to the test a little bit. Whether the area variance is substantial, well, I think a 100% request is a substantial request, and I do think that a 42% deficiency is pretty substantial as well. So those two components, strictly of the variance, to me, under the test, I take exception with. The next question that comes in is it have an adverse effect? We can argue all day long, but I do believe, anytime you're putting in more, there is some type of effect. And could it be adverse? Sure, it could be adverse. I don't think it could ever be positive, but how do you measure that? Until after it's up and done, you can't. But I think that there will be in the future an adverse effect somewhere. Again, the final part of the test, which always makes me laugh, is when we ask about, was it self-created? Everybody says the same thing. They give us a paragraph about it, and then they say, but it doesn't really matter if it was self-created, right? Even you say, that in your thing, it's a hardship, but it's not fatal. So, not to use your words against you, but it is a legitimate question. The state of New York put it in there for a reason. So I think it is, to me, it's black and white sometimes. This is a self-created issue. You've tried to mitigate the issue in every which way possible, to be fair, but it's still, when you get to the test, to me, it's still a self-created issue. That's all I'm going to say on this matter.
Thank you, Mr. Cahalan. Mr. Miller, any questions?
Not right now.
Mr. Conway?
Nothing for me.
I don't have anything at this time. The public hearing is still open, so if the public would like to be heard on this, let me know if anyone here would like to be heard. And come forward and state your name and address for the record and
Wait,
proceed.
I'm sorry, before you do, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Cahalan, I just want to correct for the record, I'm not an attorney.
Oh, sorry.
Well, that's probably why you were concise and to the point.
Yeah, right.
so,
I don't even
yeah.
try to play one on TV.
That would
Deal with
stand
them
to
all the
reason.
time, I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
Yeah,
But I appreciate the comments. Thank you.
Do appreciate what you did.
and the clock is not running either, which is nice, thank you. So, please.
Good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Good? Rose Brescia, 205 Beach Street. I want to thank Mr. Herbert for including all my previous communications, so I'm not going to repeat everything that was in those previous emails. The most recent submittal was supposed to provide solutions to the issues raised at the last meeting. But all I see here is, number one, the planning board passed this application to the zoning board, so therefore the zoning board should just put its stamp on it. And number two, in coordination with the town, the applicant will put up some stop signs and some parking signs. This is a totally inadequate response. So that's all I'm going to say about that. What I do have to say is a little more big picture. The proposed configuration and the requested variances make this project unsafe. Eastchester is a family-friendly town. It's a place people want to move to. Recently, it seems like every qualifying piece of land gets a new home, and I think that's a great thing. People want to move here. But we need to make sure our neighborhoods are safe for existing residents and new families. Because the other side of that is we're also a car-centric town. Newer homes are designed with more on-property parking, again, also a good thing. But traffic increases every year, and non-compliance with traffic laws is rampant. So what do? We have the two opposing forces, family-friendly and car-centric. We have to decide what kind of neighborhood design will allow them to coexist. This is not what this design does. This design forces us to choose. Are we family-friendly or are we traffic-friendly? The requested variances do not allow for both. Thank you.
Thank you for your time. Would anyone else like to be heard? Please come forward, name and address for the record, and proceed.
I'm Richard Slavanko, 200 Beach Street, which is across basically from where the access road would be, just touching my property. But I'm going to start out with, based on the chairman's earlier comment regarding the hyperbole, I just reviewed the minutes from my comments. While I did not see the reference cited in my words, I apologize if anything I said offended. I'm aware members are volunteers trying to do the best by our community. That is not in any way to I intended. I sincerely apologize if that was the way it was interpreted.
No, it wasn't yours, and no need to apologize anyway. It's my job to run the meeting. It's emotional and personal to you.
We got tough skin.
Yeah,
Uh,
proceed.
So on the tests, which I love because I have testing companies, and I'll try not to beat it too hard because this is like my favorite place in the world. So coming from I'm going to read from the cover letter that was supplied 1031 by the applicant. So just to bring it, all into context, test number 3 is whether the requested area variance is substantial. And a comment made by the applicant is, quote, the applicant contends that the requested variances are the minimum necessary. Test number 5, from the same document, whether the alleged difficulty was self-created, which consideration shall be relevant to the decision of the Board of Appeals, but shall not necessarily preclude the granting of the area variance. I will interject that Mr. Cahill, I think I got it right this time.
No?
No?
But-
Kalen, I did.
No.
Cahalan.
That's the way I heard it.
Cahalan.
Cahalan, all right.
Someday we'll meet in town and you'll get my name.
As Mr. Cahalan has astutely spoken to. So further on page 11 and 12, it is stated that alternative layout was discussed with the town's director of building and planning, and it was determined that the proposed roadway length coming in off of Highland Avenue would exceed the 300 linear feet test configuration requiring a variance. And we've seemingly spoken a little of that just moments ago. My comment is, a compliant lot is 50-foot wide frontage. So if we go, and it's a long, big lot, 1.8 acres, if we go in 4 or 5 lots, I've not exceeded 300 linear feet. And then if I have 2 houses on beach, because it's a 107-foot lot, I'm up to 6 or 7 houses with a very compliant as-is development, as-of-right development. What is the difference here is that somebody wants an additional house or 2. That's what's at stake. And for that, we're doing all kinds of craziness to an area we all agree is bad, and I'll speak to that a little bit more. So the proposed variance fails the aforementioned tests, 3 and 5. They are not the minimum necessary variance, and the difficulty is self-created. I think that's now pretty clear and has been established before we even got up here. The variance sought is substantially deficient in space, deficient in distance to an intersection serving 3 schools within 4 blocks with no sidewalks for the children or the very active pedestrian movements. Highland is not plagued by the obvious and well-covered dangers that exist on Siweenon Beach, particularly at their intersection. If the variance is granted just off this dangerous intersection on Beach, added would be a non-conforming, too close cul-de-sac access road, as well as a new, closer yet driveway, which will be almost next to the already crazy Beach Siweenon intersection. So I'm saying is, you have this intersection we all have been railing about. You have Rose's driveway, right? Are you at the, do you dump into the intersection? You just to the, I'm not supposed to say. I
Yeah,
think
we
she's
can't,
just, yeah.
we
I
can't
think
get all
she's-
that, so just go
Yeah,
ahead.
and then those next one's got to be right at the intersection, then we're gonna have the road right there, all added to what's there now. So that's all I'm gonna state on this point. Now I want to go to, back to the letter and, of the cover letter that I've spoken to and read from it, and then reference back to the planning board. And this again relates to the tests. So it is stated on the cover letter on page 2, under SEQR, as part of the first step in the process, the environmental review notes that regardless of whether the proposed action moves forward or not, there's an existing roadway condition that needs to be improved to enhance the overall safety of the roadway network. That was the applicant's words. Then on page 12, while the Zoning Board of Appeals may be concerned with the anticipated traffic conditions, it's quite clear that the planning board has reviewed that matter in detail with the assistance of qualified staff, and mitigation has been identified. I'm going to reference back to the last planning board meeting before approval from Mr. Nemesek on page 68 of the minutes, where I'll read his passage or his words. I guess, you know, look, it's less than an ideal traffic situation now, and it becomes a little more complicated when you're adding this cul-de-sac, you know. There's where it's at. Personally, you know, I depend a lot on Phil Greeley's input because you're neutral in this, and you're a consultant that's here to advise this board on the town's behalf. I understand we had a back and forth a couple meetings ago where I kept asking you, you know, is there something that can be done for the situation with this development that could possibly make the traffic situation, even if it's only a tiny bit better than it is right now? I know we kind of struggled with it. I reread the transcript. I think the conclusion was no. There's nothing that can be done to make it better. At best, you can add some measures. You could take some measures that might make it less worse. But anytime you add a new street, as we would be doing here, you're adding additional traffic. It's only, even if it's only an incremental amount of traffic. I think that combination on what's already a difficult street is not going to help. A little bit further down, as I view it, you know, you have a less than ideal situation and 2 things that are adding. You're adding another street, and needless to say, the street would require a variance, which this board isn't going to address. The board did not address, which was kind of intonated in the cover letter, the board did not address the traffic in the context of the variance. The secret review determination, if the secret review and determination, the planning board concluded that traffic mitigation is already needed and presumes theoretical mitigation measures would be enacted and effective to help address the obvious compounding presented by the subdivision to include additional traffic and a road roughly 100 feet away and a driveway 10 feet away. Additions to this dangerous beach and sidewalk intersection and vicinity would increase traffic of school buses, 4 school bus trips daily, increase complexity of the traffic patterns, and increase peak traffic, which is already on the order of 90 cars per hour and 8 vehicles per minute, and a primary route for 3 local schools and potentially 4 if it's added. Importantly, the already need traffic mitigations measures have never been enacted despite many residents' urgings to local authorities, which is the reasons these conditions still exist to date. One reason for this may be such measures not projected to be solutions of consequence. Such was indeed the case with speed bump that was proffered, then later abandoned at the planning board meetings regarding the 203 subdivision. Dr. Greeley of Collier's Engineering Design, in his discussion of the potential mitigation and calming measures, emphasis on potential, never goes further than stating such suggestions may be used and may help, not that they will be instituted or will work or will make a needing and meaningful difference. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to be heard on this application? Okay, seeing no one else, I'll make a motion to close the public hearing on this matter. Is there a second?
Second.
Mr. Cahalan. Okay, would the applicant like to reply or respond to anything that was presented by the public?
Just briefly, in response to the traffic count, one thing that was presented by us and by the town's traffic consultant, Mr. Greeley, or Dr. Greeley, is there several examples that were presented in the record of cul-de-sacs that are closer than the 150 feet throughout the town. And that's, as I said, that's all documented in the submissions, and it was also mentioned by Dr. Greeley. That's our main comment. You know, it is an existing condition throughout the town. And as Dr. Greeley stated, and as we stated, why the distance between the two roads is not an issue.
Okay, thank you. Okay, well, to the board. Mr. Callen, any questions of the applicant, and then
No.
wrapping up, any comments?
Yeah, I'm still curious about our council's statement. Since there's much to be decided, should we be coming in January with a resolution, or should we be waiting for the other things to happen before, or it has no bearing?
Well, you have to make a determination here. My suggestion would be, there were issues that were raised by the chairman at the last meeting in terms of the ripeness, for lack of a better word, of the application, because part and parcel of the safety concerns or the traffic issues or the traffic variance itself had to do with actions that are outside of the purview of this board and had to be enacted by the town board. And if I'm paraphrasing you incorrectly, I apologize, Mr. Chairman, but the impression that I got, and I believe you stated it correctly, was you're asking us to decide on something that may not be the case, in terms of the town may or may not change the parking on one side or another. There was a comment earlier that, I believe it was from a member of the public, well, what if they choose to put signs here or put signs there? They can't put signs anywhere without the town board approving them. So in terms of process, that is something that you need to feel comfortable if you are ready to decide this. Now that the public hearing is closed, presumably without any new information, you can vote on the application as it stands, or you can, you can act based upon that. But, based upon the question that was raised the last time, I have, and I checked before this meeting, there, as far as I know it, there has been no action taken or considered by the town board to change the parking in that area. So that may be something that the applicant is planning to do at some point in the future, but the way it stands now, I believe, is how you are faced with this.
Well, that town board action would happen after the subdivision approval. So, I mean, the situation you're proposing is the same as what the planning board is gonna have to face. I mean, the planning board is the jurisdiction for subdivision approvals. Town board can change parking regulations at any time, for any reason, independent of this application or any subdivision application. The zoning law says that the planning board considers the preliminary subdivision, then it sends it to the zoning board for consideration of any variances. Then it goes back to the planning board. The planning board would then approve the subdivision. The town board changing the parking regulations, that would be an independent matter.
So we can move forward.
Correct.
Okay. Thank you.
Anything-
you.
Anything else, Mr. Gehallen?
That's it.
Mr. Miller?
Well, here's my dilemma, and I said this last week, or excuse me, last time. It's almost like building a house on a pile of sand. If we're anticipating that the town board's going to, or not going to, one way or the other, you make the parking changes, and I'm gonna base my decision on speculation or a guess that they're going to, or conversely, base my decision on the expectation they're not going to give you that, it makes it extremely difficult for me to rule upon the application. So to Rob's point, I'm guessing a lot.
Wouldn't the planning board also be in the same position as you?
Yeah, and they'd be guessing too.
But this happens across New York State where subdivisions are approved before other approvals are
Doesn't
given.
make it
But I'm
right.
not approving a subdivision.
I understand, but I mean,
I think, though,
it's a part of the process. I mean, this
I
is the way
think
the
what
law
I'll-
is written.
I'm
I
sorry to
think the-
interrupt you, but I think our attorney is saying that the board is within their rights to make a decision, and I think that the reason why I had adjourned the matter was to have the application based upon as few suppositions as possible. And I think the board is free to infer either the worst-case scenario, somewhere in the middle, the best-case scenario on parking, because you're going to need to do that in considering the five-part test and how it affects the traffic specifically and the community at large in general.
I agree with you, and I'm gonna be guessing a lot, because I'm not willing to assume that the town board is going to do anything, because the town board will rule on their own independent basis, which makes it a difficult application.
Okay?
So,
Yes,
can I say something?
of course.
All right, well, I don't want to interrupt. Just on that, these, as I said, these recommendations were recommended by the town's traffic consultant and discussed with the planning board, but they're more based on existing conditions. Whether any of them are installed or not have no impact on the two variances from a traffic standpoint.
Okay. Reasonable minds may differ on that, but fine, that's your opinion. Please.
Just one more, just to follow up on your concern. If we get to the point where we're at the town board and the town board says we're not approving any of the mitigation measures, then essentially the application dies, because you can't approve something without the mitigation being installed or being improved or being implemented.
If that's part of the condition of the approval, and that,
Right.
in my opinion, wasn't a condition from the planning board, and you're telling us we
Oh.
can't make it a condition of our
No,
a motion.
the environmental review that the planning board conducted said that with respect to the improvements, the applicant will participate in implementing mitigation. And Mr. Dempsey went through all of the implementation measures that would be suggested.
I understand, but if you go back, if this board was to, best-case scenario, approve the variance, you now go back to zoning and say you get your subdivision. Once you get your subdivision, you basically have an approved site. Whether those variances, the town makes the changes or not, you can build.
And that's not true. because you need to have the mitigation. Well, Mr. Herbert, if you could,
Yeah,
if
could
you
you
want to
chime in?
opine.
Herbert,
Yeah,
please.
Yeah, so it's in the negative declaration that they have to, it's, the reason they got the negative declaration is because they agreed to do mitigation.
So
It invalidates the seeker findings.
it
Right.
does.
Yeah,
So they would be stopped if the town board stopped them,
correct.
regardless of every other approval.
That's my understanding.
Okay.
I mean, but you also keep in mind, there's additional, like the county Department of Health could disapprove them.
There's a lot of stuff that's gotta
The
happen.
state DEC could disapprove them. Many agencies could disapprove. This is just one review out of many.
Thank you. Mr. Miller, anything further?
Just sort of extrapolating on that. If we're going to make, if I have to decide, I would have to decide on that you're not going to get any of them for it to be plausible, because if I make that, if I assume you're not going to get any of the things you're looking to get in making my decision, then you're not going to, when you ultimately get farther down the process, your neg deck, it becomes meaningless, because you're not getting any of the things that you needed to get. Am I
Allow
missing it
our
here?
attorney to
I
opine.
think that, one of the issues that was raised by the chairman the last time we were here was that we are looking at an application that presupposes something that we do not know. And you can decide the application based upon what you have in front of you, the four corners of the page, which does not address the parking, other than, it would be better if we moved the parking so cars didn't have to meander. But but the town board has not spoken. I was under the impression that this was adjourned, and one of the questions that was raised was, what does the town board think about this, or was this going to be approached by the town board? That has not been addressed tonight at all, and I know this was something that the chairman asked for. That's why I raised it. So I don't know if that helps.
Oh, it clarifies.
Yeah, on a legal basis, it does. As far as the supplementation, it really didn't answer any of the things that we asked, but yes. Okay. Mr. Miller, anything further? Mr. Conway?
Nothing further at this time.
Okay, well, as far as I'm concerned, again, reviewing the four corners of the application and how it applies to the test, I come at it a little bit differently than the rest of the board who's focused on traffic. I'm going to assume that every additional home is going to add to traffic, as Mr. Cahalan said. But, you have to weigh and balance the equities. We're a mature society here, not I don't mean that emotionally. I mean, we're an old community, and this is not like Yorktown, where we have a lot of space to play around with. So we have to look at these issues. My bigger concern with the application, as I've voiced on now 2 separate meetings, and I've rephrased my question in 2 different ways, is that one of the major issues of a 5-part test is the feasibility of other means to achieve the end. And it may not necessarily achieve the end that the applicant wants, but not to quote the Rolling Stones, but maybe you can't always get what you want, but maybe you get what you need. So I have a problem with that, because I didn't get a straight answer the first time, and the application really neglects, fails, and refuses to answer that in any meaningful way. I discussed this with Mrs. Yulee. Your commentary is taken at face value. I see it differently in terms of the length of the cul-de-sac and what could be done with the area, square footage, and possibly as of right. But again, reasonable minds can differ. Your application is before us. You're free to present it as you present it. So the board has opined, the public has been heard. There'll be no further commentary, and nothing else will be accepted after we close out. So I'm going to make a motion to adjourn this application resolution at the next meeting. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Mr. Kalin, all in favor? Aye. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. So, one item left, and that is to wish everyone a great holiday season. Thanksgiving, Christmas, Hanukkah, New Year. We don't come back until January 9th. And I'm going to make a motion to adjourn this meeting to January 9th. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Mr. Cahalan, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. Thank you, Counselor.